Chapter 8. The great thing about baseball is that there's a crisis every day. Gabe Paul, General Manager, Cincinnati Reds. House sucked in a giant breath of hot summer air in the way he did whenever he wound up for a big pitch. But instead of envisioning his pitch going straight across the plate, strike, or instead of envisioning the water from the hose hitting its mark, splat, instead, the image of Mr. Norwood Reihart Beauregard Boyd lying on the cold metal embalming table at Snowburger's funeral home, dead, without his glasses, maybe without his clothes, covered with a white sheet, slid into his mind. His anger wheezed and sputtered. House shook his head to clear it. Finesse shook her head back at House. And that's when the sound of tires rolling over pebbles on the dirt road diverted everyone's attention. Bunch Snowburger drove his black hearse right up to the empty lot behind the school, right up to the pageant players. House stared at the hearse as his heart began a frantic bang against his ribcage. His face sizzled like it might dissolve right in front of everybody. They were coming for him. They'd ask him a bunch of questions. He'd been found out. He clutched harder at the kink in the knot of the hose to make sure he didn't let it go or get away from him. Bunch Snowburger opened the back door of the hearse, and out stepped Parting Schultz, Finesse's great-grandfather. At his full height, he was no taller than House. He had stubbly sprinkle of silver-gray hair across the back of his head and skin the color of pine cones that dotted the forest floor. He wore his barber apron. He had come straight from work. House blinked as if clearing his vision would help him understand what was happening. "Poppy!" Finesse. Her face was a mixture of release and distress. Pip, for that's what everyone in town had called Parting Schultz all his life. Pip grabbed Finesse's elbows with his slender, strong hands and gave off one great shuddery sob. Then he gestured toward the hearse. "Come on, sugar. We need the family together now." Finesse didn't wait for explanations. She didn't even say goodbye and good luck. She popped into the car with her great-grandfather before you could say, "What happened?" She didn't even glance at her subjects. Bunch clicked the door shut behind them and drove the car away. House stared at his hands, still clenching the hose. They shook like trees in a storm. "Wow," said Evan Evans, as he watched the hearse disappear. "That was some getaway." "Somebody's dead," said Ruby. "It's got to be somebody who's kin to Finesse," said Wilkie. "That could be 100 people around here," said Clebo. "Somebody run to Miss Maddie's store and find out who died," said Melba, waving the clipboard for an "I'm in command" effect. "I'll go," said Ruby. "And not because you say so." She ran across the field and toward the row of stores on Main Street. House began to cough. He unkinked the hose and let the water splat and spray into the dust. He took off his baseball cap, stuck his face into the stream of cold water, then shook the wetness from his head. "Who wants a drink?" he asked in a robotic voice. Finally, he could speak. He handed the hose to whoever would take it first. Wilkie took it gingerly from his hands. Kids eyed House cautiously as they milled around the hose, drinking or waiting for their turn. They were hot, cranky, and confused. Honey, lost in a dream, draped her arm over Eudora and sighed. "Are we practicing or not, House?" asked Clebo. He jitted across like he had ants in his pants. "It's too hot," said House. He took the hose and handed it to Clebo, who slurped up the stream of water, then spit it into the dirt and wiped his wet hand across his face. His jeans were splotched with mud from the nearby puddle, and his crispy, starched T-shirt was streaked with dirt. "We play no matter what. It's in the rules. You want to beat them redbugs or what?" "We'll beat 'em." House picked up his slumbering sister. Eudora Weltley wobbled herself to a puddle and began to slurp. Honey tucked her head under her brother's chin. House said, "I gotta take Honey home." "Hey," came a shout from across the lot. "I know who it is," Ruby hollered. "I know who died." Chapter 9. Nothing can happen more beautiful than death. Walt Whitman. Ruby grabbed the hose from Clebo and drank like she was dying of thirst. Then she made her announcement. Water dripped off her chin, and her eyes were wide in astonishment. "It's Mr. Norwood Boyd, Mean Man Boyd!" Clebo popped like a firecracker. "Baby Eater Boyd?" Ruby nodded. "Can you believe it?" Hal swayed like at the words. Honey began to wake up in his arms. "We went by his house this morning," said Clebo, importantly. "I knew it. I knew something had happened. There's a mess of kudzu all over that place, like they had to hack it down to get in there." The news crackled the air like thunder. "Are you sure?" asked Melba. "Finesse can't be related to him." "How do you know?" said Ruby. "Who is Mean Man Boyd?" asked George Latham, who was only 5. Ruby spoke with every twist of the spigot as she turned off the hose. "Meanest man who ever drew a breath of life." "Rich, too," said Wilkie. "Yeah," said Clebo, a glint in his eye. "He hoarded trunks full of treasure in that old rat trap of a house. From all them years he traveled all over the world." Clebo rubbed his hands together in a greedy gesture and stared bug-eyed at the kids. Treasure just sitting there, waiting for somebody to come find it. Kids nodded. It was a well-known, worn tale. Mr. Norwood Reinhardt Beauregard Boyd, the merchant marine, who came back from his world travels only to hole up in his house for the past 20 years alone. No one even knew what he looked like anymore. House's stomach flip-flopped. He whistled for Eudora. "Why is he the meanest man?" asked George in a timid voice, as if he couldn't help it and had to know, even if he might be sorry. "He kidnapped kids, and they were never heard from again," said Boone Tolbert. "He ate 'em," said his brother Ned, only too happy to add to the story. "That's ridiculous," said Melba, heartfeltedly, draping her arms around George and Violet both and shouting daggers at Clebo. "He couldn't get away with that." "Oh, yes, he could," crowed Clebo, "and did for years. How do you think he got food to eat? The ghosts of all those dead kids he kidnapped still live in that old place, and there's tons of 'em. He's hundreds of years old now. He comes back to life every time he dies." "Eee!" squealed George and Violet and every other pageant kid under 10. "Stop it!" shouted House. He put Honey down. She buried her face in his leg. She was sticky with sweat. "What do you care?" asked Clebo. Eudora Weltley stood next to House, wagging her tail and looking droopy. Clebo stared at the dog, then at House. He began connecting the dots. "What do you care?" he asked House again. "Unless you know something we don't." House cleared his throat. "You're scaring Honey." Honey nodded into House's leg. Her tutu was crushed. Across the empty lot, walking with a purpose gait, came Miss Mattie Perkins, Ruby's aunt and the owner of Mercantile. She wore a flour sack apron and had her hair pinned into a no-nonsense bun on the back of her head. "What's happening here?" she needled. "Is it in a convention?" Ruby's face reddened to the color of her hair. "I was just telling them about Mr. Norwood Boyd." "I figured you were." Miss Mattie put her hands on her hips, pursed her lips, and stared at everyone until each kid fidgeted. "Time to go home, all of you," she said. "There will be practice here in the morning, 9 o'clock sharp, for every name on the pageant list." Her gaze speared each ball player's face, and each one looked somewhere else. "Remember," she said, "if your mama signed you up, you show up. This pageant is not only a tribute to the county, it's a thank you to Francis's uncle for his generosity in supplying us with a new stage. The pageant will go on as scheduled on July 4th at 4 o'clock at Hallelujah School." Clebo elbowed House. House ignored him. No one protested to Miss Mattie. "Now go home," she said. "It's hot. You'll get an early start tomorrow." Miss Mattie said, "Melba, is Mr. Norwood Boyd kin to Finesse or Francis?" Miss Mattie carefully untied and retied the strings on her apron and said, "Norwood Boyd had no family." He let her reach out slowly. "Rest his soul. Rest his soul. The words were so final. They grabbed House by the throat, and he swallowed hard. The thought of crying in front of everyone horrified him. He took a deep breath and held it. "Then why?" Ruby began. "How did he die?" asked George. His face was a mixture of wonder and horror. House was lightheaded, still holding his breath. "I don't know, child," Miss Matty said. "But we'll soon find out all about it." We'll soon find out all about it. With no warning, House's knees buckled beneath him. He sank like a ship and landed in the dirt, just missing Eudora Weltley, and Honey shrieked. Miss Matty grabbed House by the arm and pulled him up. "What's wrong with you, House? You're white as a ghost." House blinked, licked his lips. "I'm hot." Clebo was ever ready with a reply. "He's out of his head with heat," he said hastily. "I'll get him home." He fanned House with his baseball cap. "Come on, buddy, let's go." House waved him away. "I'm fine." He stood and brushed the dust off of his jeans. "Suit yourself," said Miss Matty. "Clebo, if you can't find something constructive to do, go help your mama at the laundry. Lurlene's out today." "Yes'm," said Clebo. "I got to get House home first." Miss Matty hampered and walked back to the mercantile with Ruby and Melba reluctantly in tow. "I've got work for you girls. I need help with Eula returns from her trip." The energy fizzled out of the day. Kids wandered toward home, talking in little groups of 2s and 3s. The drama of the morning was over. Honey took House's hand and gave him a quizzical look. "I'm hungry," said Wilkie. "Let's practice later." The team murmured tentative approval. "House can't play later," said Boone. Ned nodded. "Yeah, he can only play after supper until dark, remember?" Clebo clapped a hand on House's pitching shoulder, as if he had been empowered to arrest him. "You coming to practice this afternoon, House?" House pulled his shoulder away from Clebo's grasp. The idea of his newfound freedom hadn't occurred to him until now. He scooped at the hot summer air with an empty overhand pitch. 4 o'clock. I'm pitching aspirin tablets. Get ready." Clebo raised his eyebrow, but didn't comment. "About time we had some fastballs," said Boone. "You've been throwing dead McIntyres for weeks." "Yeah, let's get ready for those red bugs," said Lincoln and Arnold and Evan. "Finally!" House gave Eudora another little whistle. "Let's go, girl." "That's the ugliest dog I ever saw," said Clebo. "Dogs are supposed to be houndy with floppy tongues." "This one isn't," said House. "You doggy is beautiful," Honey said simply. And with that, the baseball team disbanded for the duration of the hot day. The empty lot was left to the grasshoppers and the soon-to-come shadows and secrets of late afternoon. WBAC, in beautiful Aurora County, your station for local news and weather. Radio Flash News, composed and read by Phoebe Scoop Tolbert, June 17, noon. Lord of mercy, here's a tidbit of breaking news from Hallelujah Borough. It has just occurred to this reporter that the annual Aurora County All-Stars game, which is always played on July 4 at 4 p.m., is scheduled to take place at the same time as the once-in-a-lifetime Aurora County birthday pageant funded by Dr. Dan Devers of Our Fair County. Dr. Dan is having a new stage constructed at Hallelujah School expressively for this purpose. Now, the ball game is sparsely attended, this is true, and it is the only official game our boys get to play each year against the Smith County Raleigh Redbugs, who are also too few in numbers to warrant any official Little League team. But it is an important event. My grandsons, the Tolbert twins, are besides themselves with worry over the fact that they'll miss their game, especially after last year's loss. They want a chance to redeem themselves. They have refused to eat vegetables until there is a resolution. The time and date of the ball game cannot be moved. Families from both Aurora and Smith counties set this date aside each year to picnic and play this game, and there is no other good time when we can congregate. The pageant time and date cannot be moved. Aurora County was founded on the 4th of July, and Dr. Dan cannot leave soap opera to be in attendance at any other time, due to the fact that he has come back out of his coma on the show and is making his comeback from the amnesia. What will this mean for the pageant, for the game, mamas, papas? How do we proceed? This is Phoebe Tolbert, the vivacious voice of Aurora County, signing off until next time.